The frantic beeping of the cardiac monitor sliced through the sterile air of the pediatric ICU, a chilling counterpoint to the quiet desperation that clung to every surface in Blackwood Memorial. Dr. Julian Vance, his designer scrubs perfectly pressed, his Harvard Medical School pedigree gleaming like a polished trophy, slammed his fist against the mahogany conference table. His voice, usually modulated with practiced calm, cracked with barely suppressed fury. 12 hours! 12 hours and we have nothing! This is unacceptable! His gaze swept across the elite group of specialists, their faces etched with exhaustion and growing panic. Leo Castillo, 8 years old, lay motionless in room 314, his small body a canvas of alarming symptoms, heart rate soaring to 180, temperature spiking erratically, a rash that appeared and vanished like a phantom. A diagnosis remained agonizingly out of reach. Outside the ICU, a different kind of storm raged. Mateo Ghost Castillo, a man whose name echoed in the hushed corridors of power and fear across the city, paced like a caged tiger. His $1,000 suit, now a crumpled testament to sleepless hours of terror, felt like a shroud. The gold pinky ring, usually a symbol of unyielding control, glinted wildly as he gestured into his phone, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "I don't care if you have to wake the Pope himself. Get me the best pediatric specialist on this planet. Now!" Mateo Castillo was a man who solved problems with money, influence, and an iron will. Restaurant owners in Little Verona trembled at his name. City council members returned his calls with unnerving speed. When Senator Thorne had donated a staggering $5 million to this very hospital wing, it was Mateo who'd orchestrated the introduction. But medicine, in its cruel impartiality, did not negotiate with power. "He's all I've got left," Mateo rasped to his towering bodyguard, a whisper of raw vulnerability escaping the fortress of his hardened exterior. "Since his mother. Since Elena." The words hung heavy, a stark contrast to the ruthlessness Mateo usually projected. Just then, a figure emerged from the deeper shadows of the corridor, pushing a cleaning cart with the quiet, practiced invisibility of someone who had perfected the art of being unseen for decades. Dr. Elias Thorne, 68 years old, his silver hair a distinguished halo framing intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, moved with a purpose that belied his humble uniform. He pushed his cart towards the ICU, a mop in one hand, an unread medical journal tucked discreetly beneath his cleaning rags. His mind, a vast library of medical knowledge, registered the frantic words, the desperate tones, the grim pronouncements. He knew what was wrong with the boy. He always knew. "Excuse me," Dr. Vance snapped, his voice sharp with contempt, as he caught sight of the janitor pausing near the glass partition of the ICU, his eyes fixed on the frantic scene inside. "What exactly do you think you're doing, old man? Some of us actually went to school for this." Vance's residents snickered, their faces reflecting their mentor's disdain. A young nurse, her tone laced with casual cruelty, leaned in and whispered loud enough for Elias to hear. "Crazy old janitor. Thinks he's a doctor. Probably watches too many medical dramas." The words, though familiar, still stung. Elias's weathered hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the handle of his mop. These same hands, 45 years ago, had performed life-saving cardiac procedures with surgical precision. Now, they were deemed fit only for scrubbing floors and emptying waste bins. What these doctors didn't know about their crazy old janitor would have shocked them to their core. Elias Thorne had graduated summa cum laude from Mercer University School of Medicine in 1983, a brilliant mind poised to revolutionize pediatric cardiology. But the year was 1983, and the institution of medicine, much like society itself, was not yet ready to fully embrace the brilliance of a black physician. Despite his exceptional credentials, his innovative research on atypical inflammatory heart conditions, and his unparalleled diagnostic acumen, cultural fit had become the insidious euphemism for systemic exclusion. He'd endured 15 agonizing years of being denied positions at prestigious hospitals, relegated instead to underfunded community clinics, until the pressure became unbearable. Forced out of practice entirely, Elias found himself adrift, his medical brilliance a burden, a secret he carried in the quiet solitude of his mind. Now, hidden beneath his faded janitor's uniform, he carried a worn stethoscope, its metal polished with care despite years of disuse. Medical journals, dog-eared and meticulously highlighted, were wrapped in grocery bags and tucked into his cleaning cart. Cardiology research, pediatric case studies, continuing education materials. He devoured them during his breaks, during the long hours when everyone assumed he was simply illiterate, unthinking. As Elias moved to empty a wastebasket near the conference room, fragments of the high-stakes medical discussion drifted into the hallway. Intermittent fever, polymorphous rash, conjunctival irritation. The symptoms, described with clinical detachment by the specialists, coalesced into a familiar pattern in Elias's mind. A diagnostic siren blaring from decades of suppressed expertise. He recognized it instantly. A shiver of urgency ran through him, a ghost of his past calling him back to duty. "Excuse me, sir, what are you doing?" Dr. Vance's voice cut through Elias's momentary reverie, laced with irritation. Elias looked up, his expression impassive. "Just emptying the trash, sir." His voice was quiet, respectful, the voice he'd cultivated for invisibility. "Well, do it somewhere else," Vance commanded, waving a dismissive hand. "And next time, knock before entering a medical consultation. Some of us actually went to school for this." The residents snickered again, and the cruel nurse added, "He probably thinks those TV medical shows make him qualified." Elias felt the familiar burn of humiliation, but a more potent emotion was rising. Anger. Not for himself, but for the child whose life was slipping away because of these people's blind arrogance. He caught a glimpse of Mateo Castillo through the ICU window, the powerful man's facade crumbling as he held his son's small, lifeless hand. This wasn't a mafia boss, Elias realized. This was just a father watching his child die. Kawasaki disease, Elias whispered to himself, moving away from the conference room. Incomplete presentation. They're missing it because they're looking for textbook symptoms. But who would listen to an old black janitor when 12 Harvard-trained specialists couldn't see what was right in front of them? He was a phantom, a whisper, an inconvenient truth in a system designed to ignore him. Hour 6 bled into the pre-dawn glow. The conference room now buzzed with the collective anxiety of New York City's most prestigious pediatric specialists. Each one, a titan in their field, had been summoned by the relentless desperation of Mateo Castillo and the veiled threats that followed in his wake. Dr. Vivian Sterling, a sharp-eyed authority from New Amsterdam Medical, arrived with a meticulously organized team. Dr. Adrian Hayes, from Metropolitan Hospital, a renowned expert in rare inflammatory diseases, followed closely. Dr. Lena Chen from St. Jude's Children's, a pioneer in pediatric immunology, brought her research fellows. The medical elite of Manhattan gathered like worried vultures around a fading flame, yet Leo's condition continued its terrifying decline. Dr. Vance, his earlier confidence replaced by a thin veneer of frustration, commanded the discussion. "We have systematically ruled out every conceivable pathogen. Bacterial infections, viral syndromes, autoimmune disorders, metabolic diseases, and genetic conditions, all negative, all fruitless. The child presents with a constellation of symptoms that defy conventional diagnosis." Charts, dense with inscrutable data, were spread across the polished mahogany table like battle plans for a war they were losing. Lab results, imaging studies, consultations from specialists across the country, all normal, all useless. His fever spikes every 6 hours, then normalizes with unnerving regularity, Dr. Sterling reported, her voice clipped with exhaustion. "We've documented temperatures soaring to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, then plummeting back to 98.6 within 2 hours. The rash," she added, gesturing towards a photographic record, appears and disappears with no discernible pattern. Dr. Hayes added, polymorphous, non-specific, could be anything, or, more terrifyingly, nothing at all. Dr. Chen, a usually stoic woman, reviewed the latest blood work with a furrowed brow. White count normal inflammatory markers slightly elevated, but not significantly. It's as if his body is fighting something we simply cannot identify, a ghost in the machine. Elias Thorne, an actual ghost in the machine, entered quietly, pushing his cleaning cart, its wheels a soft hum against the polished floor. He moved with his usual practiced invisibility, collecting discarded coffee cups and stray papers. His eyes, however, were not on the trash. They were drawn, as if by an invisible thread, to a meticulously detailed symptom chart lying directly in front of Dr. Sterling. Fever patterns, rash documentation, lymph node measurements, all of it. His medical mind, honed by decades of both formal training and silent, vigilant study, processed the information instantly. 45 years of experience screamed the diagnosis these celebrated specialists were missing. "Excuse me," Elias said softly, his voice, though gentle, cutting through the dense medical jargon like a sharp blade. "The pattern of symptoms you're describing." Dr. Vance's head snapped up, his face contorting with a familiar expression of disgust. "Are you seriously interrupting a medical consultation?" he hissed, his authority challenged by a man he deemed beneath contempt. "Sir, I believe I can identify," Elias began, but Vance cut him off, his voice carrying the sharp, dangerous edge of someone whose power was being questioned by the wrong person. "Security, please escort this man out immediately. This is precisely why we have protocols about appropriate boundaries." Dr. Sterling looked uncomfortable, her gaze darting between the indignant Vance and the calm, unassuming janitor, but she remained silent. Dr. Hayes turned away, feigning sudden interest in a chart. Professional courtesy, it seemed, did not extend to black janitors who forgot their assigned place. "I just wanted to help," Elias began again, a plea in his eyes, but it was swallowed by mocking laughter. A young resident, barely out of medical school, guffawed openly. "Help? You can help by emptying the trash and staying out of conversations between actual doctors." Another resident joined in, his voice dripping with condescension. "Did you get your medical degree from Wikipedia University? Or maybe he watched House reruns and thinks he's qualified." A nurse, with cruel amusement, added, "Next, he'll be trying to perform surgery with a mop handle." The humiliation cut deep, a familiar ache for Elias. 68 years old, one of the most brilliant diagnostic minds of his generation, being mocked by medical students who couldn't match his experience on their best day. Security arrived. 2 burly guards, men who had known Elias for 15 years, now refused to meet his eyes. The racial dynamic was a silent, undeniable force in the room. "Come on, Elias," the first guard said, his voice tinged with a reluctant apology. "You know you can't be in here during consultations." Dr. Vance seized the moment for a theatrical display of outrage. "He was trying to diagnose a patient," he announced to the room, his voice dripping with incredulity. "A custodial worker attempting to practice medicine without a license. The audacity is astounding." "Typical," Dr. Hayes muttered under his breath, shaking his head. "They watch medical shows and think they understand complex pathophysiology. Next, he'll be asking to scrub in on surgery," another specialist joked, earning a round of uncomfortable laughter. Elias's dignity crumbled. These people saw him as entertainment, a delusional old black man who didn't know his place. His cleaning cart rattled loudly as the guards escorted him out, the sound echoing down the hallway like a funeral march for his forgotten career. Other hospital workers stopped to stare, and the story spread like wildfire. The crazy janitor who thinks he's a doctor. Rosa, a kind-faced woman from housekeeping, shook her head sympathetically. "Poor Elias. All that late-night reading has gone to his head." In the break room, Elias sat alone, his coffee growing cold. Other custodial staff avoided him. Word traveled fast in a hospital. The black janitor who embarrassed himself trying to play doctor. Rosa approached him cautiously, her voice heavy with pity. "Elias, honey," she said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You can't be interrupting those doctors. They went to school for 8 years. We just clean up after them. You know how it is for people like us." People like us. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they held a painful truth. In this hospital, in this society, skin color too often determined credibility more than knowledge, more than brilliance. Elias stared at his weathered hands. Once steady enough to perform the most delicate cardiac procedures, they were now deemed unworthy of even offering an opinion. The system, which should have valued healing above all else, had reduced him to invisible labor, a shadow moving through the halls of a hospital that ironically bore his family's ancient name, though he was not permitted to claim it. Hour 8, a grim milestone, saw Leo's condition worsening. Mateo Castillo, his legendary composure completely shattered, cornered Dr. Vance in the sterile hallway. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, now burned with raw despair. "You said you were the best, doctor. My son is dying, and you have nothing." Vance, his face a mask of strained professionalism, tried to soothe him. "Mr. Castillo, we're exploring every possible avenue. We've consulted with specialists across the entire country." Mateo's voice dropped, becoming a dangerous hiss. "I don't want consultations, doctor. I want results. In my world, when people fail this badly, there are consequences." The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air, a palpable shift in the hospital's carefully maintained order. Hour 10 brought even more specialists, flown in from across the nation like medical cavalry arriving too late. Dr. Bethany Shaw from Boston Children's Hospital, a revered figure in pediatric oncology, reviewed the same tests. Dr. Marcus Thorne, no relation to Elias, from Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, a leading geneticist, pored over the same cryptic data. Each reviewed the identical stack of results. Each reached the same disheartening conclusion. A medical mystery, an enigma. The medical establishment's finest minds, utterly stumped by a case that a black janitor had diagnosed in 30 seconds flat. Elias watched through the ICU window as Leo's small body grew paler, his breathing more shallow. Mateo, a formidable figure in the city's underworld, hadn't left his son's side, holding the boy's hand with the desperate tenacity of a man who could buy anything except the one thing he needed most, his son's life. "I know what's wrong with him," Elias whispered to himself, his voice a ghost in the vastness of the hospital. Kawasaki disease with incomplete criteria, but who would ever listen to an old janitor? Hour 12 arrived with the chill of devastating news. Dr. Vance, his shoulders slumped in barely concealed defeat, addressed Mateo. "Mr. Castillo, we are arranging for an immediate transfer to a specialized pediatric facility in Boston. We have exhausted our diagnostic capabilities here." Mateo exploded. 12 hours, and you're giving up? In my business, we don't quit until the job is done." The raw despair in his voice was a seismic tremor, shaking the carefully constructed decorum of the hospital. It was at this precise moment that Elias made his choice. Sometimes, doing what was right meant risking everything, even the last shreds of his carefully guarded anonymity. He approached the ICU slowly, deliberately. No cleaning cart this time, no invisible janitor routine, just a brilliant physician, finally ready to reclaim what was stolen from him 45 years ago. But would anyone listen before it was too late? The weight of decades of injustice settled upon his shoulders, hardening his resolve. Elias approached the glass doors of the ICU with determined steps, his weathered hands steady, despite the familiar burn of humiliation still simmering in his chest. This was not a janitor's routine. This was a pilgrimage. No cleaning cart to hide behind, no mop to denote subservience. Just a brilliant physician, finally ready to reclaim the destiny that systemic prejudice had cruelly snatched away decades ago. Mateo Castillo, a man forged in the crucible of a dangerous world, stood guard outside Leo's room, a sentinel of raw grief. His expensive suit, now a crumpled ruin, mirrored the collapse of his legendary composure. Dark circles etched beneath his eyes spoke of a father's worst nightmare, a nightmare his immense power could not dispel. "Mr. Castillo," Elias said, his voice surprisingly firm, carrying a newfound quiet authority. "May I speak with you about your son?" Mateo's head snapped up, his eyes, usually piercing and cold, narrowed in recognition. "You're the clean guy," he stated, his tone flat, devoid of emotion. "What do you want?" "I want to save Leo's life." The words hung in the sterile air, audacious and audacious in their simplicity. Mateo studied Elias's face with the intense scrutiny of a man who had survived by reading people, by discerning truth from deception. He saw no madness, no delusion, only a profound, unsettling certainty. "Listen, old man," Mateo began, a dismissive wave of his hand. "I appreciate whatever you're trying to do, but these doctors here, they're the best in the world, and they're stumped. Your son has Kawasaki disease with coronary artery involvement," Elias interrupted, his clinical precision cutting through Mateo's dismissal like a scalpel. "The intermittent fever pattern, the polymorphous rash that appears and disappears, the unilateral cervical lymphadenopathy. I've diagnosed this exact presentation dozens of times during my medical career." Mateo froze completely, his hard eyes widening fractionally. "What did you say?" "The doctors upstairs are looking for typical presentations, Mr. Castillo, but Leo has incomplete Kawasaki disease. It's rare, often missed, and if left untreated for another 6 hours, it will cause permanent coronary artery aneurysms. Your son could suffer sudden cardiac death within days, or a heart attack within weeks." The medical terminology flowed from Elias's mouth with the undeniable authority of someone who had spent decades mastering pediatric cardiology, a world Mateo knew nothing about, yet instinctively recognized as genuine. Mateo's street instincts, honed by years of life-or-death decisions, registered the stark truth in Elias's words. He had always trusted his gut, and his gut screamed that this man, this janitor, was speaking the truth. "How the hell would you know that?" Elias reached into his faded jacket, producing a worn medical journal, its pages brittle with age. He'd kept it hidden for 15 years, a silent testament to his forgotten past. The pages were marked with careful annotations, highlighting recent research on atypical Kawasaki presentations, research he'd conducted or followed with a scholar's dedication. "Because I didn't always clean floors, Mr. Castillo." Mateo's eyes widened further as he scanned the complex medical diagrams, the detailed case studies, the scientific language that no janitor, no matter how bright, should understand. "You're serious about this?" "Deadly serious. Leo needs immediate intravenous immunoglobulin therapy at 2 grams per kilogram body weight. High-dose aspirin therapy to prevent coronary complications, and an echocardiogram to assess current cardiac involvement. The treatment window is closing rapidly, Mr. Castillo." Elias's voice had transformed completely. Gone was the subservient janitor who emptied trash and apologized for existing. This was a doctor. This was Dr. Elias Thorne, one of the most brilliant diagnostic minds in pediatric medicine, finally allowed to practice his craft. Mateo studied Elias's fate with an intensity that had kept him alive in a dangerous world. Years of reading people, of distinguishing truth from deception, of making split-second decisions that determined life or death. "Those doctors upstairs," he said slowly, his voice raspy. 12 specialists from the best hospitals in the country. They got nothing. And you're telling me you know what's wrong? I'm telling you that while they've been running unnecessary tests and protecting their egos, your son's coronary arteries have been slowly dilating. We have maybe 4 hours before the damage becomes irreversible." A tremor of fear, cold and sharp, pierced Mateo's hardened heart. "Why should I trust you?" Elias looked through the ICU window at Leo's pale face, the machines surrounding his small body like silent mechanical guardians. Because I've been studying medicine for 45 years, Mr. Castillo. Because I've diagnosed Kawasaki disease in 23 children during my career. And because those doctors won't listen to me for the same reason, this hospital has kept me cleaning floors instead of saving lives. The racial subtext hung heavy between them, unspoken but profoundly understood. Mateo, a man intimately familiar with power structures and the ways the system worked to keep certain people in their designated places, nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? Get me 5 minutes alone with Leo. Let me perform a proper physical examination. If I'm wrong, you'll never see me again. If you're right, you save my boy's life. They shook hands, a silent pact forged between two unlikely allies, the mafia boss and the brilliant physician disguised as a janitor. An alliance born of desperation and the unequivocal recognition of genuine expertise. The doctors are in another consultation, Mateo said, checking his expensive watch. You've got 5 minutes, room 314. Elias approached Leo's bedside with the reverence of someone returning to their true calling after decades of exile. His weathered hands, though calloused from years of manual labor, moved with surprising grace and medical precision. He checked pulse points, his touch gentle yet firm, palpated lymph nodes, his fingers searching for the telltale swellings, and meticulously examined Leo's fingernails, looking for signs of desquamation, a systematic approach honed over countless pediatric examinations. Bilateral conjunctival injection without purulent discharge, Elias observed quietly, his clinical voice emerging after years of suppressed silence. Strawberry tongue with prominent papillae, perianal desquamation beginning on both hands. His examination was thorough, professional, and imbued with a profound gentleness that spoke of decades of experience caring for critically ill children. Elias carefully lifted Leo's hospital gown, revealing what the other specialists had dismissed or overlooked. There, he murmured, pointing to a faint, fleeting rash on the boy's torso. Polymorphous rash on the trunk, appears and disappears cyclically. They probably dismissed it as a viral exanthem because of the intermittent presentation pattern. A classic sign, if one knows what to look for and when to look for it. Mateo watched, a knot of hope and terror tightening in his stomach, as Elias demonstrated a depth of knowledge that far surpassed every specialist who had examined his son. The lymph nodes, Elias continued, his fingers palpating Leo's neck with expert precision. Unilateral cervical lymphadenopathy, approximately 2 centimeters, consistent with Kawasaki criteria. From his jacket, Elias produced his treasured stethoscope, its metal gleaming despite years of careful hiding. It was a symbol, not just of his past, but of the physician he had never ceased to be. He placed it on Leo's small chest, with the careful reverence of a priest performing a sacred ritual. Grade 2 out of 6 systolic murmur, he announced, his voice steady but grim. Early signs of coronary involvement. We have perhaps 4 hours before permanent cardiac damage occurs. Mateo, his voice thick with emotion, struggled to speak. Why are you helping us, doctor? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything. Elias looked at Leo's peaceful, vulnerable face, then at the desperate father beside him. Because every child deserves the best medical care available, Mr. Castillo, regardless of who their family is. Because a parent's love transcends all social boundaries. He paused, the weight of 45 years of suppressed pain in his voice. And because, for too long, I've been denied the chance to use my knowledge to save lives, I won't let another child suffer because of that injustice. As they prepared to leave the room, Elias touched his medical school ring, worn smooth with time. Mercer University, class of 1983, summa cum laude, hidden for decades, but never forgotten. What happens now? Mateo asked, his voice filled with a mixture of fear and newfound resolve. Now, Mr. Castillo, Elias replied, his eyes meeting Mateo's with unwavering determination. You use your considerable influence to make them listen, and I use my medical expertise to save your son's life. The alliance was formed, tenuous yet unbreakable. Could they convince a prejudiced medical establishment to listen to a black janitor's diagnosis before Leo breathed his last? The battle, Elias knew, had only just begun. Conference Room B erupted in chaos as Mateo Castillo kicked open the heavy oak door with violent force, the resounding crash echoing through the stunned silence that followed. 12 specialists, huddled around a projector screen displaying complex algorithms, turned in shock as the notorious Mateo Castillo entered. But he was not alone. Trailing slightly behind him, no longer carrying cleaning supplies, but walking with the quiet dignity of a physician reclaiming his rightful place, was Elias Thorne. "Meeting's over, Doc," Mateo announced, his voice carrying an unnerving, deadly authority that instantly commanded the room. "We need to talk." Dr. Vance's composure shattered instantly. "Mr. Castillo, this is a restricted medical consultation. You cannot simply—" "This man," Mateo interrupted, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on Elias, "knows what's wrong with my son." The room fell into stunned, disbelieving silence. 12 of the East Coast's most prestigious specialists stared at the elderly black janitor, their expressions ranging from outright contempt to bewildered disbelief. The sight of a custodial worker standing in their sacred medical space, challenging their collective expertise, felt like a profound violation of the natural order of things. Dr. Vivian Sterling, ever the diplomat, managed a nervous laugh, her voice dripping with condescension. "Mr. Castillo, surely you can't be serious about listening to medical advice from—" "His name is Dr. Elias Thorne," Mateo cut in, his voice calm, menacing. "And every single person in this room is going to listen to what he has to say." Dr. Vance's face twisted, a visceral blend of racist indignation and professional outrage. "This is absolutely absurd. We cannot allow custodial staff to interfere with serious medical consultation involving a critically ill child. This is highly inappropriate and potentially dangerous." A young resident, emboldened by his mentor's anger, whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. Has the old man finally lost his mind completely? Does he think watching medical shows makes him qualified? Another added with cruel amusement. Maybe he's been reading medical textbooks while emptying our trash cans. Think that counts as continuing education? The mockery cut deep, but Elias stood his ground, his shoulders squared. He had endured decades of systemic racism, and he stood before them now, his intellect intact, his resolve unyielding. He had earned his right to be heard. All eyes turned to Elias. The distinguished black man straightened his shoulders. A lifetime of suppressed medical expertise, finally given permission to emerge from the shadows where institutional prejudice had kept it hidden. "Leo has Kawasaki disease," Elias stated, his voice quiet but imbued with an authority that immediately commanded attention, silencing the last whispers of derision. "You've been treating individual symptoms instead of recognizing the complete clinical constellation." Dr. Vance's laughter was sharp, laced with racist undertones and professional arrogance. "Sir, Kawasaki disease presents with persistent high fever exceeding 5 days duration, which this patient clearly doesn't demonstrate. You've obviously been reading outdated online medical information." "The fever is cyclical," Elias countered, his devastating precision silencing the room completely. "You've been checking his temperature at standard 6-hour intervals, completely missing the specific spike pattern. Check your detailed nursing records from 6 a.m. and 2 p.m. yesterday." Dr. Adrian Hayes, his face pale with a dawning realization, grudgingly pulled up the electronic medical record on his tablet. His eyes widened as he reviewed the temperature logs. "There," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. There was a documented spike to 104.2 degrees at 6:17 a.m. yesterday, and another to 101.8 degrees at 2:23 p.m., but they normalized within 2 hours. "Classic incomplete Kawasaki disease presentation," Elias continued, his medical knowledge flowing like a dam bursting after years of forced silence. The polymorphous rash appears and disappears cyclically. You documented it as transient viral exanthem because it doesn't follow standard textbook timing patterns. Elias's expertise emerged with systematic precision, dismantling their every assumption. Check his conjunctiva, bilateral injection without purulent discharge. Examine his oral cavity, strawberry tongue with prominent papillary changes. Palpate his neck. Unilateral cervical lymphadenopathy exceeding 1.5 centimeter diameter. Dr. Lena Chen reluctantly reviewed the physical examination photographs stored on her tablet. There is documented conjunctival redness, she conceded, her voice tight. And the tongue does show papillary prominence. The lymphadenopathy was noted but dismissed as reactive. You documented every symptom individually but failed to recognize the diagnostic constellation, Elias explained, his voice patient, like an experienced teacher addressing his most stubborn students. Leo meets 4 of 5 major criteria for Kawasaki disease, plus multiple minor criteria that confirm the clinical diagnosis. Dr. Vance's authority crumbled, his racist assumptions facing systematic medical destruction. Even if you're correct about some clinical observations, he blustered, grasping at straws, this diagnosis requires years of specialized pediatric training. You're a maintenance worker. This is completely inappropriate and potentially dangerous. Test me, Elias said, his voice quiet, filled with a dignity that commanded the entire conference room. What? Vance scoffed, incredulous. Test my medical knowledge. Ask me anything about Kawasaki disease, pathophysiology, treatment protocols, complications, or differential diagnosis. I'll answer every question with the precision you'd expect from any board-certified pediatrician in this room. Dr. Vance, fueled by wounded pride and the desperate need to publicly humiliate an elderly black man who dared challenge his medical authority, couldn't resist. Fine. What's the primary serious complication we monitor for in Kawasaki disease? Coronary artery aneurysms occur in 20 to 25% of untreated cases, with giant aneurysms developing in 2 to 3% of patients, Elias recited, his voice a steady stream of knowledge. These can lead to myocardial infarction, sudden cardiac death, or chronic ischemic heart disease. The treatment window is optimal within 10 days of symptom onset, but maximal therapeutic efficacy requires initiation within 48 to 72 hours. Dead silence filled the conference room as the 12 specialists stared at Elias, their faces slack with the dawning realization that they were listening to expert-level medical knowledge that surpassed their own. Treatment protocol? Vance asked, his voice now barely a whisper, his confidence visibly draining. Intravenous immunoglobulin at 2 grams per kilogram, administered over 10 to 12 hours as first-line therapy, combined with high-dose aspirin at 80 to 100 milligrams per kilogram daily, divided into 4 doses until fever resolution, followed by low-dose maintenance therapy. For IVIG-resistant cases, consider methylprednisolone or infliximab as second-line agents. More uncomfortable silence. The medical elite realized they were being systematically outclassed. Diagnostic criteria? Vance whispered, his head bowed. Elias recited with textbook precision. American Heart Association guidelines require fever duration of at least 5 days, plus 4 of 5 principal clinical features. Bilateral conjunctival injection, oral mucosal changes, peripheral extremity changes, polymorphous rash, and unilateral cervical lymphadenopathy. Leo demonstrates incomplete Kawasaki disease with all 5 criteria if examined properly. Dr. Vivian Sterling looked profoundly uncomfortable, her eyes wide. His knowledge of current treatment guidelines is completely accurate. Dr. Adrian Hayes nodded slowly, his initial skepticism replaced by dawning respect. The symptom pattern does fit if we consider atypical presentations. Where did you possibly learn this level of medical detail? Vance asked weakly, his racist assumptions crumbling into dust around him. Mercer University College of Medicine, class of 1983. Elias responded, his voice ringing with a quiet dignity that cut through decades of institutional racism. Graduated summa cum laude. Internal medicine residency with a pediatric cardiology fellowship. 45 years of clinical experience before systemic racism systematically drove me from medical practice. The room exploded, not with sound but with shocked silence, a vacuum of disbelief. Vance's face turned crimson, a furious mask of racist indignation and professional embarrassment. Working as custodial staff raises serious questions about your current medical competency, he sputtered, desperate to regain control. Questions about my competency? Elias's voice rose for the first time, decades of systematic racism exploding into a righteous, controlled fury. I graduated at the top of my class from one of America's most respected medical schools. I've diagnosed and treated more complex cases than most physicians in this room will see in their entire careers. The only question, Dr. Vance, is why a brilliant black physician was systematically excluded from practicing at appropriate levels because institutions like this one valued cultural fit over clinical excellence. I will not allow some displaced practitioner to compromise patient care, Vance shouted desperately, his voice cracking. Compromise? Elias's fury became a devastating truth. You're compromising Leo's life while protecting racist assumptions. While you order unnecessary tests covering diagnostic incompetence, that child's coronary arteries are dilating irreversibly. In 6 hours, the cardiac damage becomes permanent. At that precise dramatic moment, Mateo Castillo delivered his calculated power play, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that cut through the tension. Dr. Vance, you know who sits on this hospital's board of directors. My friend, Senator Thorne, donated $5 million for this pediatric wing. One phone call from me, and your career at Blackwood Memorial ends tonight. The threat hung in the air like a loaded weapon, cold and undeniable. Vance, trapped between his deeply ingrained racial prejudices and the very real, dangerous consequences of crossing Mateo Castillo, finally broke. He looked around, his eyes filled with a desperate plea for an out. Dr. Vivian Sterling, her face grim with professional pragmatism, broke the tense silence. What if we perform an echocardiogram immediately to check for early coronary changes? If there's dilation, it would definitively support the Kawasaki diagnosis. Elias nodded, his medical authority reasserted. Agreed. But understand, we don't have time for extensive testing protocols. Every hour of delay increases the risk of permanent cardiac complications that could kill this child. The cardiology lab hummed with tension as Dr. Jennifer Walsh, chief of pediatric cardiology, operated the ultrasound machine. Leo lay still on the examination table, Mateo gripping his small, pale hand. 12 specialists crowded around the monitor, their previous animosity replaced by a reluctant, apprehensive curiosity. Elias stood in the corner, officially still the janitor, but everyone in the room sensed the profound shift in dynamics. There, Dr. Walsh pointed to the screen, her voice barely a whisper. Mild dilation of the left anterior descending coronary artery. Early stage, but definitely abnormal for an 8-year-old. Dr. Vance's face drained of all color. That's consistent with Kawasaki disease. Exactly as I diagnosed, Elias finished quietly, his gaze steady. The room fell into a profound, humbling silence as 12 prestigious specialists confronted the undeniable reality that an elderly black janitor had outdiagnosed them all. Dr. Sterling, her eyes now filled with a newfound respect, approached Elias. Dr. Thorne, your diagnostic capabilities are extraordinary. What is your medical background? Elias hesitated, a lifetime of guarded secrets now on the precipice of revelation. After decades of hiding his credentials, of minimizing his brilliance, the truth felt liberating, terrifying. I was an attending physician in internal medicine for 20 years, he began, his voice gaining strength. specialized in complex diagnostic cases and pediatric cardiology. My research focused on atypical presentations of inflammatory heart conditions. Dr. Walsh looked up from the echocardiogram machine, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Dr. Elias Thorne," she murmured, her voice filled with awe. "I know that name from medical literature. You published groundbreaking research on pediatric inflammatory heart disease in the late 80s and early 90s. Elias nodded slowly, his suppressed professional identity finally surfacing, fully seen for the first time in decades. "You're familiar with my work?" "Familiar?" Dr. Walsh chuckled, a short, disbelieving sound. "Your 1999 study on incomplete Kawasaki disease presentations changed how pediatric cardiologists approach diagnosis. Your criteria helped us identify countless patients who would have been missed using traditional guidelines. It's considered seminal work in the field." The room fell into a profound, almost spiritual silence. The crazy janitor they had mocked, the old man they had dismissed, was a published researcher, a pioneer whose work they had cited, perhaps even taught for decades, without ever knowing the author cleaned their floors. Dr. Vance struggled to process this information, his deeply ingrained racist worldview crumbling under the weight of irrefutable fact. A janitor who had contributed more to pediatric cardiology than most physicians achieved in entire careers. "What brought you to work here in this capacity?" Dr. Sterling asked carefully, her voice tinged with regret. Elias's voice, though quiet, carried the weight of decades of pain, decades of injustice. "Systemic racism in American medicine. Despite my credentials, my published research, my extensive clinical experience, I was consistently rejected by major medical centers. Cultural fit was the euphemism they used. I wasn't the right type of physician for prestigious institutions like Blackwood Memorial." The truth hung heavy in the air, a stark, undeniable testament to the waste of human potential. The institutional barriers that had kept brilliant minds from practicing medicine, from saving lives. "After 15 years at underfunded community clinics," Elias continued, his voice resonating with a quiet devastation. "While my applications were repeatedly rejected by hospitals like this one, I was pushed out of practice entirely. The system made it unequivocally clear that a black physician, no matter how brilliant, would never be truly welcome at Blackwood Memorial's level." Mateo Castillo, a man who understood the bitter taste of systemic discrimination, nodded slowly. He saw a fellow survivor, a kindred spirit in the battle against an unfair world. "You gave up everything." "I gave up practicing medicine, Mr. Castillo, but never my commitment to healing. Being a physician isn't about titles or prestige. It's about knowledge, compassion, and moral courage when lives hang in the balance." Dr. Walsh, her voice thick with regret, added, "Your research on inflammatory cardiac conditions influenced pediatric cardiology for decades. You're considered a leading expert on atypical Kawasaki presentations." Word spread like wildfire through the hospital, a revelation that shook the very foundations of its hierarchical structure. The janitor was a medical legend, a ghost in their halls, whose groundbreaking work they had studied for years without ever knowing the author cleaned their floors. Dr. Vance, his face etched with genuine humility, approached Elias. "Dr. Thorne, I owe you a profound apology. My prejudices, they nearly cost a child his life." Elias extended his hand, his grip firm, a gesture of grace that transcended decades of humiliation and racial injustice. "We both learned something today, Dr. Vance, but Leo needs us to focus on healing now. Will you help us treat him officially?" Dr. Sterling asked, her voice laced with profound respect. Elias looked at Mateo, who nodded desperately, his eyes pleading. "I cannot practice legally without recredentialing. Not yet," Elias replied. "But I can guide treatment. I can ensure Leo gets the optimal care he desperately needs." The hospital staff, from the senior specialist to the youngest residents, saw Elias differently now. Nurses nodded respectfully. Residents, their faces a mixture of awe and embarrassment, sought his input. The janitor's uniform remained, but everything else had transformed. "Would you consider consulting on challenging cases, Dr. Thorne?" Dr. Walsh asked, her eyes alight with a vision of the future. "Your expertise could save countless children." Elias smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes for the first time in years. "I'd be honored. This is why I became a physician, Dr. Walsh. To help children like Leo." Just then, Leo stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. "Papa?" Mateo choked back a sob, his powerful hand trembling as he reached for his son's. "I'm here, son. Dr. Elias, he's going to make you better." Leo looked at Elias, his gaze filled with innocent curiosity. Are you really a doctor?" Elias smiled warmly, a profound sense of purpose filling him. "I'm someone who believes every child deserves the best medical care possible, Leo." But the true test lay ahead. Could Elias's expertise guide Leo through the dangerous, uncharted waters of treatment, or would the medical establishment, even now, falter? Hour 14 arrived, a crucible of coordinated medical precision, as ICU room 314 transformed into a battleground against time. Dr. Sterling, her brow furrowed in concentration, prepared the intravenous immunoglobulin solution. Dr. Hayes, his mathematical mind now fully engaged, calculated aspirin dosages with exacting precision. Elias Thorne stood at Leo's bedside, no longer hiding his expertise, no longer a phantom. He was finally allowed to practice medicine at his highest level again, his quiet authority commanding immediate respect. "IV access in the right antecubital vein," Elias advised, his voice calm and steady. "Large bore catheter, 18-gauge minimum. The immunoglobulin solution is highly viscous and requires adequate flow rates to prevent hemolytic complications." Dr. Vance, now completely humbled, took careful notes like a diligent medical student, his previous arrogance a distant, embarrassing memory. "What's the exact dosage calculation, Dr. Thorne?" he asked, his voice deferential. 2 grams per kilogram body weight. Leo weighs 24 kilograms, so 48 grams total. Infusion rate should not exceed 0.5 milliliters per kilogram per hour initially, then increase gradually as tolerated to prevent adverse reactions. The medical team, a formidable assembly of intellect and skill, worked with a newfound respect for Elias's expertise, following his guidance with the deference usually reserved for department chiefs. 2 hours into the treatment, the fragile peace of the ICU shattered. Alarms screamed throughout the room, their piercing electronic wails signaling immediate danger. Leo's heart rate rocketed to a terrifying 180 beats per minute. Blood pressure plummeted to a critically low 70/40. The monitors flashed urgent red warnings that pierced the sterile silence like emergency sirens. "What's happening to my son?" Mateo demanded, his voice laced with renewed panic, his hopes transforming into terror as medical progress spiraled into crisis. Dr. Sterling, her hands trembling with professional fear, frantically checked the IV site. "Possible anaphylactic reaction to the immunoglobulin. This is life-threatening." Elias, his eyes narrowed, studied the monitors with laser focus. 45 years of critical care experience guided his analysis, his mind racing through differential diagnoses. "No," he stated, his voice firm, cutting through the panic. "This is an acute hemolytic reaction secondary to rapid infusion rate. We need to stop the infusion immediately and switch to an alternative protocol." "Alternative protocol?" Dr. Walsh asked urgently, her face pale as Leo's condition visibly deteriorated before their eyes. Elias closed his eyes for a brief moment, drawing from decades of experience treating complex pediatric cases that most American physicians had never even encountered, let alone managed. "High-dose methylprednisolone," he announced, his eyes snapping open, blazing with fierce determination. 30 milligrams per kilogram daily for 3 consecutive days. It's more aggressive than standard American protocols, but Leo's immune system is rejecting first-line therapy. I've never used corticosteroids as primary treatment for Kawasaki disease, Dr. Vance admitted, his previous arrogance now utterly replaced by genuine respect for Elias's profound knowledge. Because it's controversial in traditional American practice, Elias explained with patient authority. But I've published research on this exact scenario, IVIG-resistant Kawasaki disease. Japanese centers use this protocol with 85% success rates. I personally managed 12 similar cases with excellent outcomes. The sheer weight of Elias's expertise became undeniable as he guided the team through uncharted medical territory, a path that could either save or kill Leo. Mateo pulled Elias aside, desperation etched into every line of his face, every tremor in his voice. "Doc, give it to me straight. What are Leo's real chances?" Elias's honesty cut through medical euphemisms with surgical precision. Without treatment, there was a 25% chance of permanent coronary damage with possible sudden cardiac death. With the steroid protocol, it's untested in most American centers, but based on my research and clinical experience, there is a 90% chance of complete recovery. What would you do if this was your own grandson, Doc? Elias remembered all the children he was never allowed to treat because of systemic racism, brilliant diagnoses dismissed, innovative treatments rejected because of the color of his skin. "I would trust 4 decades of medical knowledge," he said, his voice firm. "And I would fight with everything I have for his life." Hour 16 brought the steroid gamble. Dr. Sterling, under Elias's careful guidance, administered the methylprednisolone. Leo's small body, fragile yet resilient, fought the massive inflammatory response attacking his cardiovascular system, while machines monitored every vital sign with relentless scrutiny. Elias watched with the intensity of someone finally allowed to practice medicine at his highest, most crucial level. "Heart rate stabilizing at 140, Dr. Hayes announced, his voice filled with a tremor of hope. "Blood pressure improved to 85/50. "Good initial response," Elias affirmed, his gaze still fixed on the monitors. "But monitor closely for steroid complications, hypoglycemia, mood changes, immunosuppression. The battle is far from over." Hour 18 delivered a devastating setback. Leo developed severe abdominal pain, his small body writhed uncomfortably. He began vomiting bile-stained fluid. His temperature spiked to an alarming 104.2 degrees Fahrenheit, despite the aggressive steroid treatment. "The steroids aren't working," Dr. Vance said grimly, his newfound respect for Elias wavering under the crushing pressure of the crisis. Elias examined Leo with a thoroughness that spoke to decades of pediatric experience, his touch gentle yet discerning. "No, Dr. Vance, this is expected disease progression. The inflammatory cascade often intensifies before resolution begins. His immune system is fighting the aberrant response. We maintain the current course. Stay strong, Leo." Mateo Castillo hadn't slept in 30 hours. His legendary composure, his iron will, shattered completely. He sank into a chair beside Elias, his eyes red-rimmed and raw. "Elias," he whispered, his voice cracking with a vulnerability no one had ever witnessed. "I've done terrible things in my life. Hurt people, made enemies. But Leo's innocent. He doesn't deserve to pay for my sins." Elias sat beside him, placing a comforting hand on Mateo's shoulder. His compassion, born from a lifetime of understanding systemic injustice, was profound. "Mr. Castillo, disease doesn't discriminate based on our past mistakes. Children remain pure, regardless of family circumstances. My job, our job, is protecting that innocence." The words, spoken with quiet conviction, seemed to soothe Mateo's tormented soul, if only for a moment. Hour 20 arrived, ushering in Leo's most dangerous crisis yet. His blood pressure dropped to a critically low 65/35. His breathing became labored and shallow, each breath a struggle. Cardiac monitors showed dangerous, irregular rhythms, a jagged, terrifying dance that threatened to prove fatal. "We're losing him," Dr. Walsh whispered, defeat heavy in her voice, her eyes filled with despair. Elias, his face a mask of intense concentration, studied the monitors with unwavering laser focus. Decades of suppressed medical expertise, now fully unleashed, sprang into action. "He's developing distributive shock secondary to systemic inflammation," Elias declared, his voice ringing with authority. "The vasculitis is compromising cardiac output. We need aggressive hemodynamic support immediately," Elias directed with a calm, life-saving authority. "Dopamine infusion. Start at 5 micrograms per kilogram per minute. If no response in 30 minutes, add dobutamine at 2.5 micrograms per kilogram per minute." Dr. Sterling nodded, her respect for Elias growing exponentially with each precise command. "Dr. Thorne, you're directing this resuscitation with an expertise beyond most of us." "I'm sharing knowledge that should have been utilized decades ago," Elias responded, his eyes never leaving Leo while guiding the complex cardiac support protocols. "Medicine works best when we combine experience with humility." Elias's expertise proved invaluable as he navigated the team through life-saving interventions, managing a crisis that most American physicians had never even witnessed. Monitor urine output every 15 minutes. Kidney perfusion is critical. Check arterial blood gas and lactate levels hourly. If we see metabolic acidosis with lactate above 4, we'll need sodium bicarbonate. Every command was precise, every instruction critical, as the fate of a young boy hung precariously in the balance. Hour 22 brought a miraculous turning point. The beeping of the monitors, though still present, seemed to soften, to find a rhythm of hope. Leo's fever broke dramatically, his small body cooling, finally yielding to the aggressive treatment. His heart rate normalized to a steady 95 beats per minute. Blood pressure stabilized at a healthy 95/60. A faint, natural color began to return to his previously pale cheeks, chasing away the gray pallor of illness. "There," Elias pointed to the monitor, a quiet satisfaction in his voice, a profound sense of triumph in his eyes. "Cardiac rhythm regularizing. Systemic inflammation responding to treatment. Coronary vasculitis resolving." Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Leo opened his eyes. He blinked, his gaze unfocused. Then slowly, deliberately, he focused on his father's worried, tear-streaked face. "Papa?" Mateo choked back a sob, his powerful hands trembling as he gripped his son's. "I'm here, buddy. Dr. Elias. He saved your life." Leo looked at Elias with innocent curiosity, his large eyes searching. "Are you really a doctor?" Elias smiled, a warm, genuine smile that filled him with an overwhelming sense of completion. "I'm someone who believes every child deserves the very best medical care possible, Leo." Dr. Walsh reviewed the follow-up cardiac ultrasound with amazement, a stunned reverence in her voice. Coronary artery dilation completely stabilized. No progression to aneurysm formation. If we had delayed another 6 hours, everyone in the room knew the unspoken truth. Leo would have suffered permanent, potentially fatal heart damage. Hour 24 arrived, not with the sterile calm of a hospital, but with the joyous energy of life renewed. Leo, miraculously, was sitting up independently, his eyes bright. He was asking for apple juice and, to Mateo's immense relief, wanting to go home. Complete recovery achieved, not by the collective wisdom of the renowned specialists, but by Elias's unparalleled expertise and unyielding determination. Mateo, his face wet with tears of profound gratitude, turned to Elias. "How do I repay this, Doc? Money, favors, anything?" Elias shook his head, a quiet dignity in his posture. "Just be the father Leo needs, Mr. Castillo. Show him that people can change, that we can be better than our worst mistakes. That's enough payment for me." But the broader impact of Elias's actions had only just begun to ripple through the medical community. Word spread like wildfire, the brilliant black janitor who saved the mafia boss's son. Day 3 arrived with Leo Castillo, bright-eyed and energetic, walking the pediatric ward independently. His IV removed, his spirits completely restored. Laboratory values had returned to normal. A follow-up echocardiogram showed a complete resolution of all coronary artery changes, with no residual cardiac effects. Dr. Vivian Sterling presented the case during grand rounds, her voice filled with unmistakable respect. Atypical Kawasaki disease, correctly diagnosed by our clinical consultant, Dr. Elias Thorne. Treated with an innovative methylprednisolone protocol. The patient achieved complete recovery with no cardiac complications whatsoever. Sustained applause filled the conference room as medical professionals who had once dismissed Elias now recognized his life-saving expertise, his undeniable genius. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, her voice ringing with conviction, addressed the assembled staff. This case reminds us profoundly that medical expertise transcends titles and prejudices. Dr. Thorne's knowledge saved a child's life when our conventional approaches failed. Elias stood quietly at the back of the room, wearing both his janitor's uniform and his cherished stethoscope with equal pride. Mateo Castillo found Elias later in the quiet solitude of the hospital chapel, where Elias had prayed each morning for 15 years, seeking solace and strength. "Elias," Mateo said, his voice thick with genuine emotion, "I can never repay what you've done for my son. Seeing Leo healthy and knowing I'm practicing medicine again, that's payment enough, Mr. Castillo," Elias replied, a gentle smile touching his lips. Mateo placed a thick envelope on the worn wooden pew beside Elias. "For reclaiming your rightful place in medicine, Elias." Elias didn't open it immediately. The real gift, he knew, was Leo calling him doctor again. Dr. Vance approached, his demeanor completely transformed, a rare, genuine humility in his eyes. "Dr. Thorne," he began, his voice hesitant but sincere, We want to offer you a formal position as senior clinical consultant. Your expertise deserves institutional recognition." Elias considered carefully. "I appreciate that deeply, Dr. Vance, but I also wish to continue my custodial work. This hospital, indeed any hospital, needs both types of care. I believe I can provide both with equal dedication." Leo's discharge day arrived with a celebration. Mateo carried his healthy, energetic son to the elevator, a profound sense of relief washing over him. "Dr. Elias!" Leo called enthusiastically, waving at Elias from his father's arms. "Will you be here for my checkups?" Elias waved back, his heart full of warm affection. "I'll be here, Leo, taking care of other children who need help." Elias returned to his evening routine, but everything had changed. Medical residents stopped him to discuss cases respectfully. Nurses sought his input with genuine appreciation. The janitor's uniform remained, a silent testament to his journey, but respect had been earned through undeniable excellence. His stethoscope now hung openly around his neck, no longer a hidden shame, but a proud symbol of knowledge conquering prejudice. 1 month later, Blackwood Memorial Hospital buzzed with a transformation that extended far beyond Leo Castillo's miraculous recovery. Leo himself bounced into the pediatric cardiology clinic with boundless energy, completely healthy and vibrantly alive. His follow-up echocardiogram showed perfectly normal coronary arteries, no residual effects from the Kawasaki disease. "Dr. Elias!" Leo ran enthusiastically to hug Elias, who was present for all follow-up consultations as the hospital's newest senior clinical advisor. Dr. Walsh smiled with immense satisfaction. "Textbook perfect recovery, Leo. No activity restrictions whatsoever. You can participate in any normal childhood activities. Your heart is absolutely perfect." "No evidence he ever had the condition," Elias confirmed, his professional confidence unwavering. Elias now divided his time equal between his custodial responsibilities and formal medical consultation. Hospital administration, recognizing brilliance wherever it existed, had created the unique position of senior clinical advisor for complex diagnostic cases specifically for him. 4 days a week, Elias reviewed challenging diagnoses with medical residents and attending physicians. His diagnostic accuracy rate in complex cases reached an astonishing 96%, higher than most department chiefs achieved. Dr. Julian Vance, once Elias's most ardent detractor, had become his most vocal advocate. "I was perpetuating unconscious systemic racism," Vance openly admitted during a hospital-wide meeting. "Dr. Thorne taught me that medical brilliance transcends skin color, and wisdom doesn't require conventional career paths." The pediatric department now routinely consulted Elias on challenging cases. His insights had led to correct diagnoses in 17 cases that had previously stumped entire medical teams. National media attention brought widespread recognition to systemic racism in healthcare. 60 Minutes profiled Elias's incredible story, "The Doctor Hidden in Plain Sight," which went viral across social media platforms. Thousands of comments poured in from healthcare workers sharing similar stories. Brilliant minority physicians working below their capabilities, foreign-trained doctors whose expertise was dismissed, older physicians forced out by discrimination. Blackwood Memorial, spurred by this public reckoning, partnered with civil rights organizations to identify and support underutilized medical professionals within their own ranks and beyond. Elias became the primary advocate for recognizing hidden medical talent, regardless of current employment status. Medical schools nationwide invited Elias to lecture on diagnostic reasoning. His presentation became required viewing for pediatric residents across the country. Mateo Castillo, true to his word, established the Dr. Elias Thorne Foundation with a $5 million endowment to support minority medical professionals facing systemic barriers. The foundation funded medical license reinstatement, continuing education, and anti-racism training programs. 43 physicians received assistance in the first year, with 12 successfully returning to full medical practice after years of systematic exclusion. Elias reconnected with his Mercer University colleagues through video conferences. For the first time in 15 years, he felt complete as a physician, respected, valued, and practicing at his highest capabilities. Blackwood Memorial implemented comprehensive policies to identify and utilize expertise wherever it existed. 3 additional custodial workers, inspired by Elias's story, revealed significant medical backgrounds. A security guard disclosed extensive emergency medical technician training and a desire to pursue further medical education. Elias still arrived punctually for his night custodial shift. He mopped floors meticulously, maintaining pristine hospital cleanliness with the same dedication he brought to a medical consultation. "I perform both roles with equal pride," he told reporters, a gentle smile on his face. "Healing environments require both clinical excellence and environmental cleanliness. I contribute to patient care whether holding a mop or a stethoscope." 8 months later, 7 minority physicians who had been working in non-medical roles at Blackwood Memorial had been identified and supported toward full medical practice reinstatement. Elias Thorne's case became mandatory study in medical schools nationwide, a powerful narrative recognizing and overcoming systemic racism in healthcare institutions. Leo visited Elias monthly, bringing him drawings of doctors and hospitals. "When I grow up," Leo declared one day, his eyes shining with childish determination, "I want to help sick kids like Dr. Elias does, no matter what they look like." Elias framed his first paycheck as senior clinical advisor next to his Mercer University medical diploma. 2 pieces of paper, 45 years apart, representing an identical commitment to healing and a triumph over institutional prejudice. The janitor's uniform hung beside his crisp white coat in his office, both representing the tools of his medical trade. Now, in a healthcare system often judged by credentials and assumptions, Dr. Elias Thorne reminds us that true medical expertise lives in knowledge, experience, and compassion, not in the color of one's skin or the prestige of one's current position. Every day, we encounter people whose uniforms don't reflect their true capabilities. The janitor who graduated summa cum laude, the security guard who is a trained paramedic, the cafeteria worker who is a licensed nurse from another country. We judge by appearance. We assume by race. We dismiss by age or accent. But brilliance doesn't expire. Medical knowledge doesn't diminish because of systemic racism. Excellence doesn't disappear when society refuses to recognize it. How much of Dr. Elias Thorne's potential is currently unrecognized in your hospital, your workplace, your community? How many brilliant minds are we systematically overlooking because we can't see past unconscious bias and institutional prejudice? The next time you encounter someone in a service position, remember Elias's story. That person might be a brilliant physician denied opportunities due to racism, a foreign-trained specialist whose credentials aren't recognized, a retired professional working to survive financially, or someone with life-saving expertise you desperately need. America's promise is that talent and hard work will be rewarded regardless of background. But too often, we waste human capital because we can't recognize excellence in unexpected packages. Dr. Elias Thorne didn't become a physician when Blackwood Memorial finally acknowledged him. He was always a physician. Systemic racism just prevented us from seeing his brilliance. Every Elias deserves recognition. Every Leo deserves the best possible medical care, regardless of who provides it. Every Dr. Vance deserves the chance to confront their unconscious biases and become better. If this story moved you, share it. Not for views or likes, but to remind the world that medical expertise transcends race, age, and job titles. Systemic racism costs lives when we ignore qualified professionals. Dignity and competence can triumph over prejudice and assumptions. Hidden talents surround us in every workplace and community. Subscribe to stories like these if you believe in recognizing the brilliant minds society often overlooks. Comment if you've ever been underestimated because of your race, age, background, or current circumstances. And remember, the next time someone offers medical advice or professional insight, don't ask about their skin color or current job title. Ask about their knowledge, their experience, and their heart. Dr. Elias Thorne, 68 years old, adjusted his stethoscope in the hospital mirror. The same weathered hands that should have been saving lives for decades. The same brilliant mind that was hidden by institutional racism. The same commitment to healing that never wavered, despite systematic rejection. But now the world finally saw what was always there. A physician who never stopped learning, never stopped caring, never stopped fighting for the chance to save lives. The most dangerous prejudice is the one that prevents us from recognizing life-saving brilliance.